Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to the Ecom Dispensary, episode number 143. I'm pretty excited for this one. This one has strong ties to my overall identity and the way that I live my life. I think the same is true for the Scott Man. In this one, we're talking about the e-commerce wealth building plan. This is essentially our kind of outlook and the way that we see what we're doing in terms of business and how that is hopefully eventually going to lead to us being a bit more wealthy than average, one might say. I'm not saying that we need to be freaking Jeff Bezos, but I'd like to have a comfortable amount of money to be able to do the things that I want to do in this life. And ecom is one part of that. So we kind of want to talk to you guys about our outlook about, how we're kind of using the e-commerce business model to reach our long-term wealth goals. Now, obviously, we're coming from a place of this is, really in the grand scheme of things, we're pretty in the beginning stages of this entire process. Not trying to act like we're like, super mega trillionaires or anything, but we do have a plan, and I think the plan could be useful to some of you guys who want to do the same thing. So
I'm just trying to be an Indian rupee trillionaire.
And I think we might already be Indian rupee trillionaires.
Yeah. What's the currency in Venezuela? What currency do we have to do to become a trillionaire?
I think the currency in Venezuela is like milk, like cows, maybe. I don't know.
I guess
I don't think they have much of a currency over there.
Pesos, but best currencies are the ones where they periodically have to decide, like, let's just knock off 3 zeros. Let's stop calling this fucking 4 mil pesos and let's just start calling it 4,000 pesos again.
That's is that what we're gonna have to do, man? That's gonna be the US in a couple of years with all this inflation.
Maybe.
Okay. All that aside, the e-commerce wealth building plan. So obviously, most of you guys, I'd say this is probably true for me and Scotty. Probably the primary reason we are in this game, this e-commerce game, the reason we do this type of business is to make money. We want to make that green cash moolah so that we can live our lives how we want to. And it's pretty good for that, I would say. I'd say e-com is pretty good for that. But in the long term, besides just, the vague idea of making money, I think it's probably smart to have some sort of a plan for not just making a little bit of moolah, but, truly building a large amount of wealth. Or, there's not really necessarily a number value on this. What's large to you might be small to someone else and vice versa. But we want to build, actual money that is going to be able to like sustain us, because I think the way I see it, the whole goal is to kind of make enough money by a young point in your life, I guess you might say, so that you can kind of live the rest of your life how you want to. You don't have to, wake up at 7 a.m. every day and drive to a 9-to-5 job. And you can just kind of do what you want, spend your time how you want. Maybe that's building more businesses. Maybe it's just playing 36 holes of golf every day. Maybe it's just doing jujitsu all day. It varies depending on who you are. But I think we all want to get to that point. The thing about e-com is the way that a lot of people treat it, it's not very conducive of that, kind of more long-term wealth building. But it can be. It definitely can be. It really has just such massive potential to, allow you to build like a sustainable income and, ideally over the course of a long time, real sustainable wealth if you treat it the right way. And I think that's kind of me and Scotty's goal. That's what we try to talk about, what we try to teach everyone who listens to us. E-commerce does not have to be some short-term thing where you build a store, it makes you money for 6 months, and then you're back to square one. That's not how it's been for us. I mean, that is how it's been for us in the past, but that's not how it is for us anymore. We've seen the light. And I really think that, when done right, e-commerce can really be something that sets you up for your entire life. And I think that's kind of our plan, isn't it, Scotty?
Yep. definitely. It doesn't. You don't have to go as big as you'd think. Like an e-commerce brand that, in the grand scheme of things, nobody knows about. Like if you ask random people in the street, nobody's gonna have heard of it. That can set you up for life. It's pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean, even something that like almost no one knows about can set you up for life. So that's our plan, and we want to walk you guys through kind of what this looks like, starting from zero. So obviously we're not at zero, but we want to, you know, we got to give a little bit of the background, a little bit of the backstory before we get into the fun stuff. So I think one really important thing is, and this is not exactly something that is well talked about, I think, in the entire e-com dropshipping community. Before even starting an e-commerce business, before even getting into it, you essentially need some other primary source of income. Obviously, you have to live. You got to be able to make enough money to support yourself at some point. You know, maybe you're young enough where you don't have to worry about that quite yet, but eventually you're gonna have to fund your own life. You're gonna have to buy food, pay rent. You know, you don't want to be living in a cardboard box on the side of the street, eating out of the dumpster. At least I personally don't. You also need a laptop and some internet, you know, if you want to do the whole e-com thing. So that costs money. You basically need some sort of income. Now, does this mean that you have to get a 9-to-5 job? Not necessarily. But really, I don't really think that that's the worst route if you have a more long-term outlook like this, because one, you need money to fund your life, but you also need money to fund the e-com business that you want to start, because it is not free to start an e-com business. You got to spend money on ads. Once you get something working, drop shipping the way that we talk about, validating your ideas, drop shipping from China, you're going to need to put up money for inventory to get inventory into the US. These things cost money. And if you are unemployed and don't have any source of income, you're just not going to have the money to be able to do that. So that's kind of step one.
Also, like, fuck you if you're broke, no skills, no money, no experience, and you're not willing to work a 9-to-5. Like, you haven't earned the right to wake up at 9 a.m. or wake up whenever the fuck you want, do whatever the fuck you want all day, and have money show up in your bank account. Like, we will tell you how you could potentially get there in the future, but if you're starting from scratch, it's supposed to be hard, and you're supposed to have to do shitty things, and you're supposed to have to work. Absolutely. Not always in the ideal boxer shorts in your fucking bedroom way. Like, you're gonna have to work whatever you can to make money. That's the way it is starting out. That's the way it was for everyone.
Yep. I think kind of everyone goes through that sort of hustle stage, and that looks very different for some people. For me, that hustle stage was delivering pizza, which was not exactly the most, you know, grueling work. You know, it could be starting some sort of a side hustle. I mean, dude, there's so many things you can do. Like, one free idea for you. It's coming up to Christmas time. You could have a service putting up people's Christmas lights in wealthy neighborhoods, because, you know, those wealthy old people don't want to get on a ladder to put up their Christmas lights. There's an idea for you. You know, that's a real, like, boots on the ground way to make some money. So whatever you got to do, whatever that looks like.
For everyone in Europe, they're like super confused how that's a business. I had no idea how crazy people get with the Christmas lights in the US. But that's entirely besides the point, but an interesting cultural observation. When we drove around the suburbs of Chicago, seeing those lights in the rich neighborhoods, insane. Never seen anything like it.
Yeah. Especially we went to my aunt and uncle's house, I think.
Yeah.
And they, you know, that's like my wealthiest family members, and they live in a very nice neighborhood. And yeah, I mean, the Christmas lights on some of those houses were insane. And I if I had to bet money, I would bet that the overwhelming majority of those houses did not, the people that own those houses did not put the lights up themselves. They paid someone to do it. So
certainly looked super well done. Like, it didn't look like an amateur job.
Yeah. So anyway, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. You know, you gotta hustle, you gotta grind. Whatever it is that you got to do to kind of put yourself in a position where you have a little bit of extra income to be able to put towards starting a business. You know, do it. Get a job. You could do freelance work, just like do random side hustles, flip stuff off Craigslist, whatever. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. But main point is, that comes first. You need money to be able to start an e-commerce business. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people really understand, is that e-com really is meant to be, at least at the start, a secondary source of income. E-com is not meant to be your primary source of income from the beginning. Ideally, over time, it does get to that point, but it doesn't start off like that, because it requires investment. It requires time to get things working. And if you want to keep growing the business, I mean, you really kind of got to keep reinvesting the profits to be able to order more and more inventory. So you got to keep that in mind. And again, this is a more long-term play, and it's really not even that long-term, honestly. Like, of all the things, all the paths that you could take to set yourself up for life, I think this is actually probably one of the quickest. But people's ideas of quick is very skewed, with everyone talking about building a dropshipping store and making $100,000 in a month or something like that. So you got to keep in mind that the time frame for this is not overnight. I think ideally the time frame is kind of like the first year or two. Once you have a primary source of income, whatever that is, a job, freelance work, whatever it is that you're doing, you spend like a year or two trying and failing, building stores, testing ads, testing products, and essentially just trying to get something working. And really what you're doing here is building the skill sets that you need to succeed with e-com. Getting good at marketing, getting good at advertising, getting good at writing copy, all these things that, kind of factor into e-com. You have to get good at these skills, and that does not happen overnight. Will it happen for some people quicker than others? Absolutely. Some people it takes a lot longer. Some people it's, they get quote unquote lucky, but you can't really control how long it takes. So you just kind of got to focus on what you can control. Once you have something working after that, kind of initial stage of trying and failing and, just testing a bunch of different stuff, everyone really wants to scale it as fast as humanly possible. And trust me, I know, because I've been in those shoes. I know what that's like. Scaling as fast as possible can certainly be a mistake. I don't think this is news to most of you guys, unless you're like brand new to me and Scotty in the e-com dispensary. We talk about this all the time. If you scale too fast without having the correct backend in place with, reliable fulfillment, great customer service, et cetera, scaling too fast will destroy your business. And I think that's a huge thing, is like, once you have an e-com business that is working to some extent, even if it's, a low scale, even if it's, say, you're doing $1,000 a day in revenue, a couple $100 a day in profit, that business is much more than just that $300 a day that you're making in profit. That business is an asset. And instead of just trying to focus on making as much money as possible, and this is also something that we've talked about, a huge goal of this whole online business thing isn't just to make as much money as possible, but it's to sustain doing it and, running an online business that can support you and your lifestyle, sustaining that for as long as humanly possible. Because once you get to that point where you're making enough money that you're able to like quit your job and you can make your own schedule, you can kind of spend your time how you want. Going back from that, I think would probably be the worst thing in the entire world. If I had to stop what I was doing and go get a job and start waking up and at the same time every day and, going into work and working a set amount of hours and not being able to make my own schedule, if I had to do that at this point, I would be absolutely miserable. So once you get to that point, a huge focus is making sure that you can continue doing that indefinitely. And scaling really, really fast can potentially put that in jeopardy. So you really got to keep that in mind, I think.
As can increasing your living expenses. Keep the living expenses down, build up fucking savings, so that even when you have a down period, a down month, a down year, down decade maybe, that you're still okay and that you never have to go back.
Yep. Absolutely.
There's like an inflection point. Like, I guess there's a lot of inflection points probably, but like getting to 100K net worth is hard. Like, it's not that hard, but like it feels super fucking hard, and it seems like it takes a long time, especially with taxes and living expenses, and just you got to make more money than you think to get to 100K net worth. But then suddenly you're at 200, and from like 300 to 400 is nowhere near as hard as 0 to 100. and numbers just start to add up and pile up, and then suddenly your investments are growing, and then suddenly your ecom business that was so hard to get from 0 to 1K a day, suddenly it goes from 5K to 10K almost overnight, just because the time of year Q4 hit, lockdown, whatever. So like it can feel like a really slow grind, but remember that it's not linear, and there's just certain times where you hit like an inflection point, and growth goes sort of exponential, and you see massive growth in a fairly short period of time. And then you also have times where you regress, your income goes down, you're not making as much. It's frustrating. But as long as you keep the living expenses low enough that you can sustain yourself without having to go back, you will get over that period of slower growth or no growth or regression, and you will have good times again.
Yep. I think that's also a good case for if you are in the situation where you're working a regular job and trying to start e-commerce on the side as a secondary source of income, kind of a side hustle. I think that's a good case for just sticking with the job, even if you're at a point where your business is making more, you're making more from your business than you are from your job. There's definitely a case to be made for staying at your job and just continuing to work on the business and not just like giving up that source of income for something that's not as predictable. I'm not saying that it's not as like, I don't know, it's definitely not as like sustained and predictable as a 9 to 5 income. You're gonna have up months, you're gonna have down months, but if you want to really be sure that you can continue doing that, then there's definitely a case for that.
Yeah, there's also a case for people not really getting their business off the ground even after a couple of years, just because they have that safety of the job, and although they don't like the job, they don't hate it enough to really get off their ass. There's both. I also have always erred towards the side of keep doing what you're doing, keep your job, keep your stable income, and build on the side. Others like yourself quit the job super quick and seen great results from that. I think it's partly a personality thing, whatever you're drawn to doing. If you think you need to put, what is it, put
Put your back
back to
against
the
the wall.
wall. Yeah, if you need to put your back against the wall, I guess go for that. Personally, I'm more of a safety minded. And I mean, keep in mind, safety mind is like if you have the job, that also allows you to swing for the fences in business. I think the worst situation long term is if you're trying to do ecom, but you quit your job and now you have to do freelancing for like long term, like having to now service clients and get clients and do a bunch of unpaid work to get clients just so that you can sustain yourself or freelance work and trying to build your ecom business on the side. That's a lot harder than doing a 9 to 5 job that doesn't take up much mental energy. Even if it takes up more time, it doesn't take up much mental energy, and allows you to focus on ecom more fully. So I think that's kind of the worst situation where you're for a long time having to pursue clients just to get by until your ecom brand takes off. So I would rather have a job than a bunch of clients while you build up your ecom business, if that makes sense.
Yep. I do think it's very personal preference for me. Part of me thinks that these days, like I would probably do myself some good putting my back against the wall a little bit more because I think I've gotten kind of comfortable. But I think it's it's one of those things that you kind of got to know yourself and you got to know what motivates you, and just that was something for me that I was pretty young, but I knew that about myself. I knew that if I didn't drop out of college and put my back against the wall, that I probably wasn't going to do it, and that ended up working out for me. But it just depends on who you are, I suppose. But that's a little bit off topic. Back to the e-commerce wealth building plan. What I was saying a second ago is your ecom business, once you have it working, is much more than just that, whatever amount of money that's bringing in cash flow. Over time, it's also an asset, and an asset is something that you can sell. That's kind of the beautiful thing about ecom is with some other business models, you don't quite have the ability to sell it and to exit out of it and get a fat lump sum payment for it. But ecom, you certainly do, and it's definitely a pretty common thing in the ecom game for people to do that. So for us, that's kind of the main thing in terms of like, wealth building. There's a lot of different, like, I guess, ways of thinking about this. But the way that I see it is, for me to get as wealthy as I want to, I either have to make a lot of money every month, like a lot, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in profit, or probably the slightly easier route, I would say, is selling a business and getting, a fat check for multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, ideally millions of dollars, all in one go, all at one time. Say, for example, that we sell our business and, me and Scotty both walk away with a check for $1 million. $1 million doesn't really, in my book at least, make you rich per se. Like, I don't think that that's quite enough for me to live my ideal lifestyle for the rest of my life, but it's a really solid starting point. From there, the investments that I can do with that in terms of crypto, stocks, real estate, other business ventures, that is it's like a huge leap pad towards doing that. And I think, at least for us, that's kind of the main goal. Like, yes, we want to build this business. We want to make money from it while we're running it. All that stuff. But realistically, I think the way that, at least the way that I see it, the way that I'm going to get rich is by selling e-com businesses, getting these big lump sum checks and then investing those and making, smart investment decisions. And then from there, it's kind of just like it's kind of a time thing. Like, you just kind of got to let these things compound. And I think that's really our plan, is to start e-commerce businesses, build them, grow them, run them, somewhat automate them so that we don't have to be putting in a shit ton of work on a daily basis. And then a few years down the line, sell these businesses, make out that nice fat check, and then do it all over again.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
Scotty, what's your thoughts on, once we get to that point, that obviously we've mentioned this before, we haven't actually sold an e-commerce business yet. At least, I mean, you could say that I did once, but that doesn't really count.
Definitely does not count.
Once we do get to that point, we sell this brand that we've been running for almost the past 2 years now. Like, what's your kind of investment plan? How do you kind of see the way that you're going to turn whatever amount that is into a lot more?
I mean, Dogecoin and Jake Paul NFTs was pretty much the plan, to be honest.
Somehow, I don't think that that's true with your slightly risk averse nature.
Yeah, maybe not. So you're asking what would I do with that $1 million check?
Yeah, say we sell the brand, you get a check for $1 million. What are you doing with it?
So what I would do with my 74 million Indian rupees is I don't know. Well, first you're gonna pay the fucking tax, man. So you got to get that out of the way first. I probably have some combination of, I mean, for me at this point, probably smaller allocation to stocks, more to crypto. I would not go into real estate because I don't know what continent I want to live in, never mind what country, never mind what city. So I would not be getting real estate. I do not want to buy real estate as an investment either. So it would be stocks and crypto essentially.
Yeah.
Maybe set aside like a certain amount for high risk business ventures where you're like, use this as sort of like funding for the next business and or to buy the next business.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. Like, that it's so like basic and boring, honestly, but that's kind of my outlook as well. I mean, I think like we're pretty much on the same page, except I think if I was to get that check today, I think I probably would buy a house either for myself to live in, or honestly maybe a beach house to like that could like Airbnb and then go down and stay there whenever I wanted to. Could do that now. To this point, the reason I haven't really gotten into real estate is because, I mean, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, one, it's like fucking scary. Like, that's it's a big move, and I've been hesitant to do that. And then it's also, on the other hand, like the way that I justify that to myself is it's tough to justify real estate when the returns in crypto are what they are.
Yeah. I'm jealous of you, honestly, for having a place that you like, that you could see yourself living in for the considerable future. I mean, you have not only the country that you like best, and I mean, you've traveled a fair bit now. Still haven't been to Europe, but you've traveled a fair bit. You know you like the US more than all these other places you've been to. Okay, cool. You also are in a great state, I think, and you're in a good city and a good state. Like, in terms of location, you're pretty much set.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it like that because there are so many options. But I mean, even with real estate, like I don't look at that as like if I buy a house that I absolutely have to stay there. Because even if I buy a house and live in it, I always have the option of either selling it or renting it out and living elsewhere.
Yeah, you do. You do. That you do. I think there's just, in terms of like selling the business, there's just something, it's taking chips off the table is what it is. I had that convo with a buddy of mine who is like a broker, or not broker, advisor, something like that. He advises people when they sell their business. And I mean, that's essentially what it is. You're taking what for us is essentially the largest part of our net worth is our ownership of our various businesses. You're taking that paper wealth and turning it into like actual liquid money that you can, if not touch, at least quantify and keep track of. Whereas right now we have this huge unknown of what is this business worth. It's for sure the most valuable part of our net worth, but who the fuck knows what it's worth? And it could all be gone tomorrow if we get a couple Facebook bans or whatever. So it's like you're taking chips off the table. And for us, it would be, I mean, great case, we'd almost be like conservatively set for life, or at least like on a really good path towards set for life, where we could say after that, the only thing we're doing is super high risk businesses, where we're shooting for 100 mil business or nothing else, like nothing else is worth doing anymore. Whereas right now, we're still, if not scraping by, we're not set for life yet, nowhere close. And selling that business, getting those chips off the table, putting them into whatever investments you want to put them into, that could sort of let you say like, okay, whatever else happens, like I could fail at every business I try for the next 10 years and still be okay. I think mentally that would be it seems now like that would be a big step mentally. I think when we do it, it'll probably be just another day and it turns out nothing's changed. But at the moment, it still seems like a big goal and something to strive towards and something that would be like life-changing. That's kind of the way it goes. Once you do it, it's never as life-changing as you thought.
Yeah.
Nothing's as life-changing. Nothing's as life-changing as like the first $5,000 in a month, or like the first time you don't need to work and you're just sitting on your laptop and money shows up.
Yeah.
Like that's the most life-changing.
I mean, I'll say, yeah, like the most life-changing is when it just changes your lifestyle. When you don't have to wake up for anyone anymore. You can spend your time how you want. Like, and that's not a high level of income. I mean, that could be $5K a month, So I think that's really the most life-changing. And then after that, it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much experience we have to talk about that at the higher levels, but I can't imagine that it's going to be anything like super, super crazy until maybe, we're at the point where it's just like the numbers are extremely high and then you can kind of like really increase your lifestyle. I think maybe that could be somewhat life-changing, but
maybe.
I do think though that like people don't realize how realistic it is to get a either high 6 or 7-figure check from selling an e-commerce business. That's a pretty realistically possible thing to do within a few years, which I think is honestly insane to think about because there are just so few other things that I can think of where that is also the case. I mean, you basically, the only things that really applies to is starting a business. And e-commerce is, it's one of those things where I think e-commerce is like the perfect balance of it's attainable to get into when you're starting from no experience. Obviously it takes time. This is not an overnight thing by any means, but there's also an incredibly high ceiling. Like the biggest e-commerce companies, Gymshark or Snow Teeth and Whitening, These are
Amazon.
I mean, yeah, that's a bit of a different story, but these are huge 8, 9 figure brands. The people who own these are extremely wealthy, and the ceiling is just so high, and the barriers to entry are relatively low. And I think that's one of the reasons that ecom really attracted me, because it was something that I could get started doing when I was you know 20, 21 with no college degree. And then here I am a couple years later, and it's still the thing that that's how I'm going to get rich. It's a it's a pretty cool thing.
Has a very high potential, especially when like people talk about how like selling courses or agency or whatever is easier, and it's easier to get to like 3K a month or 5K a month or whatever maybe, but like getting to 100K a month with any of those businesses is so, I don't even know if I want to call it hard. It's just unlikely. Whereas there are so many ecom brands that you've never heard of that do 100K a month profit. It's insane how unknown brands, how much they can do. And then the brands that you do know about, that's just a whole different story.
Yep.
It's also crazy, like how, again, like nothing happens overnight, but it happens so quick. When you like looking back, it's so fast. The fact that we have the life that we do at our age is just insane. Like it just doesn't make sense that the entire world is getting up at 6 a.m., going to work, working 40 hours a week for someone else to get by. And we just wake up when we want, do what we want on any given day, work on it, whatever we think is important, and money just keeps showing up. At age 22, 24, it just doesn't make sense. Pretty cool. Pretty fucking cool.
It is cool, man. That reminds me of one of the previous episodes we did about like hacking the matrix, and the other episode about how like it's like a clown world and we're all just living in it. We just live in a crazy time, and we live in a crazy time partly right now because of COVID and the entire reaction to that, and that's its own separate thing. But in terms of the internet and just how possible it is to do something like this, like it's really interesting for me to think about if I was born 40 years before I actually was. I wonder where I would be. Would I have started a business at the age that I did, or would I have gotten I don't, it's hard to say. I like to think that, even without the internet, I would still be doing, something of my own, but it's just so much more possible now. And it's not easy, but the tools are there, and it's attainable if you're willing to put in the work, if you're not an idiot. Just so much more attainable than it's ever been in the entirety of like human history.
Yeah. I had a surreal moment at some point this year, probably January, where I'm tracking my net worth like month to month, and it went up like between like crypto, good month for business, it just went up an amount where you're like, this covers my living expenses for like 3 years in a month.
Mm-hmm.
This is just insane. Like in 1 month, I've made enough money to like not need to work for the next 3 years. Just absurd. Just doesn't make sense.
Pretty wild. And then I guess like past selling the brand that we're running now, from there, like I mean, to me, I kind of just want to keep doing this, man. Like whether that's starting new brands from scratch, or maybe with some of that money, use that as maybe some quote unquote seed money to buy existing businesses, grow those, all those, exit out of those. Like this is the thing, and it's just like I kind of forget sometimes because I'm so, this is so much a part of my life now that I kind of like just don't look at it from this kind of bird's eye view. But it's really incredible that like this is, generally speaking, a pretty enjoyable thing to do,
Yeah, I would say so.
It's pretty dope.
Just a fun game.
Get to do this.
Just a fun game. And you get to like, I mean, we employ quite a few people now.
Yeah.
Like we're giving opportunities, giving money to people every single month that we like. you're working with people you like, you're giving jobs to people that you like. It's fucking awesome. It's fucking awesome. Being
Very
able to
cool.
employ like your business partner's son who's in high school, he's got the fucking best high school part-time job anyone's ever gonna have. Just shit like that. It's pretty cool.
It is cool, man. I mean, all the amazing people that we've met through our various online ventures, you know, it's just wild, man. It's just wild. And I mean, I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to do this. And it is a balance too, because, sometimes I feel impatient, and I want this entire plan to come to fruition like now. Especially you see people who are younger than you, who are making more money than you, who are absolutely killing it. And it can make you feel like you're behind. But I think, you just got to keep in mind that everyone's on their own timeline. And especially if you're somewhat young, like you have so much time to make this sort of plan work, whatever your plan is, whatever that looks like to you. Um, you have the ability to do that, and it's not going to happen immediately. But if you just stick with it, and kind of what we're always talking about every single week, if you're just brutally consistent, it's all going to pay off eventually.
Yeah. And that profound phrase that your buddy told you, that mastermind, where it's like, enjoy the struggle while it lasts, it'll be over before you know it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, like that grind period, it's hard to go back to that grind period once you're like, I don't really need to grind anymore. And as much as it sucks, as much as you're tired, as much as you're hungry, as much as like you really want it now, you're gonna look back fondly on this period of struggle if you make it. Got to make it though.
We all gonna make it. Yeah. So that's the short story long. That's the e-commerce wealth building plan. Who knows what, in 10 years, 20 years, who freaking knows if this plan gets stuck to as we've laid out. I think that there's certainly room to build and grow on this, but at the moment, that's kind of how I'm looking at things. I think that that's kind of our plan, and maybe that gives you some ideas for what you can do with this. Maybe it's somewhat inspirational. I'm not sure. I think it's pretty crazy what's possible. So get after it, hombres. Get after it. That's the lesson of the day. You got anything else you want to add before we end this episode off, Scott Man?
I do not. Let's wrap it up.
Beautiful. Well, folks, that has been episode number 143, the e-commerce wealth building plan. Got some interesting, potentially dangerous stuff going on in the next episode. We'll talk to y'all there.